Good afternoon, esteemed colleague and respected friends and respected guests. This is my pleasure to introduce the next panel. We have been hearing about a lot of AI, artificial intelligence since morning. Now I think it's time to take a deep dive and go one more layer deeper. So the next panel is going to be the next wave in enterprise experience with GenAI. And the way this panel is going, we are going to see the difference in this panel compared to what has been discussed before. The evolution GenAI is bringing, it's not just next wave. I will say it's a next tsunami, what is going to happen in the AI industry, and then how the different industry in different vertical are going to get impacted by this evolution. So we have experts from the industry, and then they are coming from different groups and different companies. They are going to share their experience, how these models are getting implemented, what kind of learning we are getting, and what kind of evolution we are seeing, and then what kind of future is going to be there as we move forward. So I would request our moderator, Mike Gualtieri. He is going to lead the session, and then we are going to hear from the expert panelists what is their experience and what is their learning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ravindra. Hi, everyone. So a little bit about me. My name is Mike Gualtieri. I'm an analyst at Forrester Research, and I cover artificial intelligence for them. So what that means is I'm talking to both the world's largest enterprises and also both large technology companies and startup technologies in AI. And I've had hundreds of conversations with both over the last 12 months. And guess what? It's all been about GenAI, of course. So I'm happy to be here with our panelists, who I will introduce each one. And we're basically going to go through a focus on enterprise AI. What are the use cases? How does it work into business operations, customer experience as well? What are some of the challenges? And what is the future of this? And the very near future, in the next 18 months or so. So our first panelist is Edwina Fitzmaurice. She is a Global Chief Customer Success Officer at EY. She's leading the AI employee experience at EY. As the Chief Customer Success Officer, her focus includes overseeing customer success in client technology and addressing challenges in technology, geopolitics, and demographics, a very global organization and role. So thanks for joining us. Our next panelist is Arun Ramchandran, and he is known as RAC. So I will be referring to you as RAC from now on. He is the president and global head of consulting and GenAI practice, high-tech professional services at Hexaware. His expertise lies in integrating generative AI into core operations and leading initiatives in cloud migration, customer experience, automation. RAC is also an alum from IIT Bombay, where he graduated as closely associated with the Pan IIT initiative. Thanks for being here, RAC.
Welcome.
And finally, our last panelist is Margarite Zettervall. Margarite is client director for EY at Microsoft. She currently leads Microsoft and EY 360-degree relationship. She leads the strategy and execution of sales, customer success, service and operations to help EY grow and optimize their business and customer delivery. Thank you to all of our panelists for joining us. So keep in mind that we are going to talk about how companies are implementing this, what are the use cases, the challenges, and then the future. So those are our sections. But we absolutely, well, I say absolutely without seeing a timer, but we are absolutely allocating around 10 minutes for questions from you. So hopefully you have the app, and as you're thinking of questions, throw them in the chat, and we will take them. So my first question is to you, Edwina, and that is, could you share just some of the insights in your role at EY in terms of GenAI, the initiatives that you see internally to transform your organization, but of course also with clients?
Yeah. Thanks. Well, it's great to be here with all of you. I'm
Sure, many of you, hopefully all of you know EY. We're one of the big four, so accounting, tax, consulting, 400,000 people in 140 countries. And we've been on an AI journey for a long time, so 10 years and more really working with AI and really doubling down. We've probably spent $1.5 billion on AI over the period, particularly in the last few years, building out infrastructure and technology. So GenAI is the latest thing that we're bringing to the party. And we're learning a lot from that and really seeing the impact that it can have across both our organization, but also with our clients. So the kind of areas that are hot and operating and working that we're really spending our time and effort on is around things like, of course, customer service. So anything to do with call centers, contact centers. There's a lot of benefits that can be had when you apply generative AI, that conversational interface, suggesting next best action, real-time transcripts, personalizing experiences. And we've seen big uplifts in productivity, whether it can be, people will quote anything from 20% improvements in productivity to 80, 90% improvements in productivity. And with some of our clients, we've been doing work on outbound sales as well, and call centers. We're seeing similar kind of productivity gains, but also about like a 50% uplift on the actual sales themselves. So actually impacting the top line because the agents are that more effective. They're learning from each other. So that's just one area. And another area would be in the supply chain and looking at, for example, with vendors. We've been working with some clients where one of our clients had 14,000 vendors that they were dealing with. And by applying generative AI to the conversations back and forth, the queries that are going on there, they were able to get a 70% improvement in productivity on the vendor management side themselves and an 80% improvement in net promoter scores. So that's a win-win. You're both saving money and you're getting a better outcome. So that's really interesting. And then, of course, we think about generative AI not just as large language models, but more in a multimodal way. So we're looking at, and we've got a really interesting applications that we've been building out around the talent and HR agenda in particular. So areas like onboarding. We've been integrating generative AI and actually executing them as avatars as well, so that we actually have people, particularly young people who are coming into organizations, being onboarded by having a conversation with avatars. And we've done that also with a lot of our client data, I should say our insights data, not client data. For example, our consumer products area, we've used that as a domain. We've loaded it up with generative AI, and we have an interface going on like that, where you're speaking to the data, and it has a face, and it has an experience. It's very interested in that. Knowledge, but obviously research is a huge area for generative AI. Finance and reporting, analysis. And also, we're using it around brand marketing and communications. I don't know if any of you have seen the EY.AI ads that you might have seen in the airports or in the train stations. So that's a generative AI. We actually use the AI itself to generate the images about generative AI. So we actually managed to do that. So I think across the board, there's lots of opportunities, but it's not suitable for everything. And we might talk about that at some point.
Yeah, what I'm hearing from you is that AI really sweeps across all business functions, and I hear that too in my research. But it's kind of interesting too, because a lot of these use cases we heard pre-Gen AI, but Gen AI takes them to the next level, like things like customer self-service, where a customer's interacting with a chatbot. Well, now it can be that much more articulate because of some of the large language models. So it's quite interesting. Rak, over to you. So one of my favorite phrases when people get hysterical about AI is I say, AI is software. Let's remember, AI is software, and software is for business processes and applications. So that means it's a lot more than just a model, right? We've got to take that intelligence and we have to use it in applications. So in your experience, what are the key success factors for enterprises to actually integrate the goodness of generative AI in their business processes, in their software?
Sure. No, thank you. Thank you for the question. And glad to be here as well. both as a panelist and as an IIT alum for the Pan IIT conference. So delighted at the attendance and the participation. Thank you for the fellow panelists as well. So I represent Hexaware, which is a digital transformation and software engineering company. We are owned by Carlyle Private Equity. A lot of you who were here in the morning would have heard David Rubinstein. He's one of the founders of Carlyle Group, and we are one of the portfolio companies within Carlyle. We've been in the technology services business for a while. We've been in AI for several years. Last year, we formed our GenAI consulting unit and decided to focus on a lot of implementation and use cases that our clients are looking at. Our overall strategy for GenAI is around 3 tracks. One, we are using GenAI to disrupt ourselves. As a services company, there are a lot of areas where GenAI is going to change the fundamental model of delivering, let's say, engineering, testing, customer service. The economics of that delivery model will change. So we are looking at that as a big internal disruption and how we can get ahead of the curve. The second thing that we are doing is helping our clients in different industries, whether it's manufacturing, consumer products, financial services, healthcare, insurance, professional services, in implementing some of their use cases. And we'll talk a little bit about what kind of use cases we are seeing there. And the third is we are actually partnering with firms like Microsoft and with OpenAI. In fact, OpenAI's enterprise license or enterprise edition was initially launched with just 4 or 5 big enterprises, Carlyle being one of them. And since we are a Carlyle portfolio company, we got an advanced preview of some of their features and being able to actually take it to market and so on. So working with some of the partners in seeing if there are particular areas of industries, either through a new model or through a partnership that we can help disrupt. So these are the 3 broad strategic items that we are looking at. Now coming to your question about which are the areas the clients are looking in terms of some of the use cases, we see them categorized along 3 buckets. And those 3 buckets, we have internally termed it as G, P, and T. G stands for growth. So all the growth-related aspects, whether it's sales, marketing, customer retention, customer service. The productivity ones are the maximum number of use cases that we see. Around 70 to 80% of the use cases we see are around operational efficiencies, knowledge management, technical debt reduction, which all comes under the productivity bucket. And then the T stands for trust. Aspects related to security, privacy, compliance. We think managing AI models will be a big aspect in the future, making sure that it adheres to regulations. So we have a set of things that we are doing to make sure that the governance and adherence to this is taken care of by the clients as well. So these are the 3 main buckets and the areas that we are looking at from a solutions. And we can talk about some of the use cases.
Yeah, we'll talk about some of the challenges. Yeah. Margarite, can you hear me? You're way down there.
It's a little echoey.
Okay. So Microsoft, I mean, there might be some small children growing up today that they might grow up thinking that Microsoft invented GenAI because, you know, Copilot and so forth. So Microsoft's really at the center of this GenAI technology. At Forrester, we have a perspective that there's not going to be, you know, a few giant models like OpenAI or Cohere, Anthropic, et cetera, but rather there's going to be tens of thousands of models, millions of models. And there's some of those might be base models, some of them might be fine-tuned. There might be ensembles of models in some way. But the point is, GenAI is going to create an enormous amount of creativity in startups, right? But for those to flourish, they need the infrastructure and they need to help to do that. So my question for you is what is Microsoft's approach to partners and helping helping the largest of enterprises succeed, but also someone with the seed of an idea, startups?
Right. So thanks for having me. Appreciate it. I think Microsoft, first of all, it's been the most exciting 2 years to be at Microsoft. I've been there 10, and it's like a new company. It's very exciting. But Microsoft's philosophy is that we want to take AI and democratize it. So it's not just having 3 or 4 mammoth companies own everything. It is trying to get AI edge to the end user to, I heard a story that Satya told about getting it right to a farmer out in a very low, Wi-Fi area, and he's running models to understand how to farm better and to get the, effects on the crops. So that is the most exciting piece of this. Now, again, obviously, Microsoft has invested a ton in the AI, but now it is, again, Microsoft's philosophy has always been to go to the partners. Enable partners as fast as possible. This is a platform. This is not just for one company or two. This is for everyone to utilize. So things like GitHub Copilot and seeing partners. There's 100 million developers in GitHub Copilot right now, or in GitHub. And so just imagine the efficiency and the reuse and the code that is just being generated. And that software layer is getting smarter and smarter as the day because so many humans are able to touch it. So it's just extraordinary.
I think, and I think Microsoft's investment in OpenAI is well known, but I think didn't Microsoft also invest in Hugging Face?
In what?
Hugging Face. Everyone familiar with Hugging Face?
Yeah.
I'm not familiar, but.
I think so.
Okay.
Hugging Face is a big open source community.
Yes, open source is obviously, it was a new company when Satya Nadella took over. We went open source, and we love Linux.
Yeah,
were
you saying, did he just say Hugging Face? Yeah, I said Hugging Face. Yeah, it's a strange term, but there's enormous open source communities out there as well. So let's talk about some of the, well, actually I had one comment on that too, on the partners, because you said developers. We kind of recognize predictive AI as being sort of the prediction AI versus the generative AI. And the great thing about GenAI doesn't particularly help you to be a data scientist, because a lot of that knowledge that you need is actually abstracted in the creation of the model. So it does activate literally millions of developers who do not need a data science background. So let's get to the challenges. Edwina, back to you. What are some of the challenges that EY thinks about, that you think about, and how do you advise clients on those?
Yeah, actually, to pick up on what Rack said, I mean, the number one thing is around data and security and getting that infrastructure right. So, people need to really look at their data strategy, security, privacy. What's happening to the data where's it coming from, and can you use it? If you're going to load up your own data, bringing your own data is one of the most powerful things you can do to actually really get these models inside a corporation to deliver real value. So how you use your own data is very important. So that's a big part of it. And of course, you're looking for all the issues around legal, compliance, ethics, hallucinations. All of that's very important, because can you rely on the outputs as well is a big part of it. So I don't think we're through that at all yet. Humans are definitely in the loop around all of this to do a lot of the checking. So that's one. The second area, I think, is value creation. There's a lot of hype around this. There are definitely a lot of benefits, but you have to know how to get them. And we see a lot of experimentation going on at clients, but after 6 and 9 months of that, they're sort of, where's the money? And there's also quite a bit of cost that comes with these systems. So the business case to actually apply generative AI in the right place. Where is the value? How do you count the value? And are we getting highest and best use is a really big area as well. And I think there's a bit of a reset going on around that. And then I think the third area is around a mindset and a readiness, which, we see a lot of people struggling, quite honestly. Leaders don't maybe fully understand, and they're looking for very quick results which aren't necessarily available. People are afraid about what's happening about their jobs. There's a big learning curve, so we spend a lot of time on learning and experimentation, hand-holding, prompt engineering, which will go away over time. But there's definitely that cycle going on as well. And I think not acknowledging the change that's happening to people really slows things down, and you have to create an environment where people feel, so we apply, so what do? We say everything has got to be very human-centric, employee experience is our lens, or customer experience is our lens. So we're doing all of the work that we do and the work with our clients through that lens, through the experience, the human lens. And I think that allows people to be on the journey and to participate in with hearts and minds.
Yep.
And it's not just a productivity play.
Yeah, and I think there's different levels of risk based upon the use case too. I think that was mentioned this morning by Arun, actually. Like if you're making a product recommendation and it's wrong, the risk of that versus something that's more supply chain related. There's different risk levels. But a question that I often get asked too, or gets discussed, is regulated industries. And the thing about regulated industries, though, that I think could be counterintuitive is that they're actually pretty mature and experienced at identifying and analyzing risk and mitigating it. So I actually talked to a ton of financial services companies who are not shying away from this. In fact, they're maybe more equipped to deal with the uncertainties of this than others. So pretty interesting. Margarite, how is Microsoft, we talked about the Microsoft ecosystem and the applications, but what are some of the things Microsoft's doing to help companies overcome the risks and some of these challenges?
Sure. I think we've, again, leaned in on the responsible AI framework. We have things that are published. We're very active with policy. Brad Smith is often at the White House to talk about, again, the very risks and things that are very concerning to folks in this new paradigm. But there are frameworks. Obviously, it depends on the level of data, like you said, the use cases, on what that threat looks like or what that risk looks like. But there is frameworks and governance to be implemented, to be thought about, and to be really implemented within kind of each company and each domain, and to do a lot of the sharing and best practices. So it is, I think, bringing a lot of industries together in new ways, which is a good thing. But we are leaning in as hard as we can around even red teaming our own Copilot and whatnot, as we were kind of cycling through the Copilot builds, and that has been probably the fastest built software we've ever launched. But we red teamed it again with some of those disingenuous thought vectors. But it really is about trying to use the human critical thinking and up-leveling the thinking on the models and making sure that we put guardrails in place.
Yeah, and I've talked to some companies using the concept of a guard model. Right, yes. So a model that kind of examines the output. I mean, that might not be perfect either. So Rack, from your perspective, from Hexaware's perspective, how do you assist clients in overcoming, well, first of all, what are those challenges and how do you help them overcome them?
Right. So there was a study which was published by Accenture recently. They said that they surveyed the C-level execs. 85% believe that GenAI is critical and important. But only 50% said, in fact, more than 50% said they are not ready in terms of how to use GenAI and adopt it. I think what we are trying to do here is we have to first become a GenAI company ourselves as we take the implementations to our clients. We are around 30,000 people strong. In terms of number of global consultants that we have, $1.5 billion. We have trained over 50% of the company on GenAI fundamentals. So we have in the last 6 months, and it's been one of the fastest adoption in terms of training as a ratio of total number of employees. There are 3 levels of courses that we have: foundation, intermediate, and advanced. 15,000 have got trained on foundational level. These are across all service lines, whether you could be a coder, you could be a tester, you could be a customer service agent, you could be an operations person. And 3,000 have got trained into the advanced level, which means they can now be leveraged for different GenAI implementations. Around 75% of our client base has actually shown interest. So we have live conversations, opportunities that we are working with our clients across different sectors, right? Healthcare, insurance, financial services, and so on. In the last 6 months, we have got 10 revenue-paying engagements, which have actually moved ahead, both as POCs and as actual real production loads of GenAI. And I can tell you this very closely adheres to what McKinsey had come out with several months ago as the top 5 business functions that will have the most economic value add from GenAI. And those 5 namely are operational productivity, sales and marketing, customer service, R&D, and software engineering. So sales and marketing, two different aspects, right? Marketing and then sales related. So these are the 5 areas where they feel that the economic value of GenAI will be the maximum, like 75% odd. And we are seeing that in the use cases in the market, right? So with one of the consumer product companies, we are actually helping them create a personalized ad campaign using GenAI generated video clips. So that's on the marketing side. For a manufacturer, we are actually helping them come up with a centralized knowledge base which can be queried using GenAI and RAG-based techniques to provide answers on policies, on service desk issues, and problem resolution. So we are doing multiple aspects like this. Some of them haven't gone to the next level because clients are still trying to figure out security aspects, which models to use, what are some of the policies, what data sets to now vectorize and put it in production. So I think this year is when we see a lot of that now moving into much faster gear in terms of taking things forward.
I think the adoption is going to accelerate for all the reasons you just said, but also for another reason, which is every ISV in the world is trying to figure out how they can put GenAI in the next feature of their product. So, I mean, if you think of all the mid-sized companies, it's like, oh, well, I have this accounting system. I'd like to use GenAI. Oh, good, it's coming in the next upgrade, the next version. So GenAI is going to find its way in custom applications.
Yes.
It's going to find its way in just applications that people simply buy as well. So quite interesting. So our last thing is about future trends and innovations. And we only have a few minutes. Why? Because I'm leaving 10 minutes for questions. So I'm going to ask each of you to maybe just make a quick comment on the future. I'll start with you, Edwina. Where do you think we're going with this?
So I think we talked a lot about productivity, and I think that's what we're seeing, kind of people building a faster horse right now. So I don't know that we're seeing a lot of disruption, actually. So, you can answer your emails faster, great. What's the disruption? So I think the disruption that really I'm expecting, we're already working on, is actually around intelligent agents. And they're going to be, using the LLMs as the input and the conversational interface. The second part will be loading up domain-specific data and then having applications and other LLMs behind to actually take an action. And so you're going to see the, these agents, I think Microsoft might call them co-pilots, other people call them GPTs, we call them skills. And you have an app store of all of these intelligent agents that can do a piece of work. I've been in consulting 20 odd years. Process re-engineering has always been a very linear thing, where you break down a process and you try and collapse a bit of time out of that and be efficient. Whereas now you're talking about more like a graph way of thinking about things. You're having a conversation, you can call on the different kind of sub-elements, these intelligent agents, to come together, and we become agent orchestrators. Ultimately, that's what we're doing. And and that's going to start coming out in the next couple of months, actually. I think that'll be with us all within a year, that kind of multi-agent approach. And we'll see an explosion of it, I think, to your point. Startups, it's not just, companies will have their own, but there'll also be a proliferation of these to call on. And it's a very different way of working.
And I think the myth that it's too expensive to create your own model is getting busted, because I hear that narrative all the time, like, oh, it's too expensive. Well, can't you only say that if you also know the value? It's like, oh, that costs 17 cents a second or whatever. Okay, yeah, but maybe it's saving you $1.
I did computer science. You don't need to be a computer scientist these days. You can generate these models. The low-code environment is definitely there. Yeah. And we're looking to move away from being kind of doing things automatically to, we need a bit of auto-magically going on here. Yeah. That's what we're waiting for, and I think that's coming.
Yeah. Arun?
If I may just add to what Edwina was saying, right? I think the model-related developments are moving in two directions. One is more domain-specific and what you call as SLMs, which is the small language models. There is also the trend towards LMMs, which is the large multimodal models. Because I think the language part will be one, but now moving into videos and moving into sounds and some of the other modes are going to be critical as well. So I think that's going to be an important technology development that we need to watch out for.
And one thing I would add to like the LLMs, we think the language model as human language, right?
Yes.
So, we know the coding use case, right? There's coding use case, but every engineering discipline has its own language. life sciences, biology,
Yeah,
right? The
very
DNA,
domain specific.
domain automotive assets in CAD drawings. So those domain specific don't even have to be human language. They can be engineering language, and it'll sweep across all design tools. Does this mean we're ready for the questions?
Yes.
Oh. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt in between, because I guess there is a lot of interest from audience. We want to address some of their questions.
We were just getting started.
So I'm going to read the first question. In what way do medium-sized enterprises leverage generative AI to compete with larger corporations, specifically in terms of operational efficiency and innovation? So anybody can answer the question.
I didn't hear that because of the echo. Did anyone?
Yeah, how can small, medium enterprises, I can take a shot at it.
Sure. Yeah.
I think the GenAI is going to democratize the leverage of AI. Till now, it has been a little bit, you need to have a big data science team, you need to have a machine learning operations. I think now some of the aspects of managing the data, getting that efficiencies, automating the process will become more easily available through all the models, right? There are hundreds of models to choose from. Even Azure, you go to the model catalog, you can choose some of these models which are, easy to download and easy to just use online as well. And you can then fine-tune it based on the parameter, the workload that you have. I think small, medium enterprises are going to benefit much more disproportionately by leveraging GenAI. That's my understanding.
Yeah, and it's also so much more accessible to developers. You don't have to necessarily be a data scientist. And I talk to insurance companies that are downloading models from Llama 2 from Hugging Face and messing around and doing some stuff. Usually it's RAG, retrieval augmented generation.
I mean, it's like what cloud did for infrastructure and workloads. GenAI is going to do for data, right? It's going to make it more easy to manipulate and get data sets and be able to come up with conclusions.
And I think one of the main factors, reducing the time, reducing the manpower, that's a better way to compete with the bigger. So probably another interesting question I'm seeing here, hallucination is such a serious concern. When we are implementing application, a lot of business users, they are very concerned about hallucination. And then right now our logic and approach, they are basically brute force driven. We are dealing with billions of parameters, not billion, it's 200 billion to the scale of trillion. And now the response is when we are dealing with the business user, this brute force mechanism, how do we basically make sure business users are more convinced and so that they can basically rely the outcome of like GenAI outputs?
Anyone want to take that?
I mean, I would say that a lot of what we're experiencing is a lot of testing. I mean, it is literally like you have to test and test and test and see what those results are. So, I mean, it is going to take time. Nothing is perfect. We've seen that, again, in a lot of the testing that Microsoft has gone through with some of the Copilot development. So I would just say, again, like this data, you have to look at the accuracy in the data sets that you're using the LLM against. And so accuracy of data has always been plaguing organizations, I would say, for every industry. So testing is, I think, the only way to get there.
Yeah, and that's, I always emphasize, that's why I always say, too, that AI is software, and you always test software.
I think the RAG technique is going to really help reduce the hallucination. It's already doing it, right? You create RAG data sets for enterprise data, which you can then have the LLM query apart from its own public data set. And that's already being used in several places to reduce the hallucinations and the inaccuracy, depending on what use case you have.
Yeah, there's also a risk mitigation strategy that many companies are using, that financial companies have used for firms for years, which is champion challenger, and also A/B testing, right? So yeah, you should be scared of hallucinations in certain circumstances, but it doesn't have to be all or nothing. You don't have to be fully confident and release it to 100% of the traffic. You could release it to 2% of the traffic. It reduces your risk.
Plus, look, you need humans in the loop still. There's no question about that for certain types of work. You can also create filters and training to try and stop that. But I'd also say, I think people think this is now a silver bullet for everything. It isn't. GenAI is suitable for certain things. If you are in a life and death situation and you're trying to make a decision in a healthcare situation, you don't need a probabilistic answer. Should I? Maybe? I don't know. Like, what you want is a deterministic answer. You want the answer. And so GenAI isn't suitable for everything, and people have to pick and choose when is the right time to call the GenAI and when is the right time to go back to traditional applications or traditional ways of working. And I think regulated industries are going to be very clear about that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think those are the railguard we need to define, and then the approach also going to get refined as the industry is moving further. Beyond GPT 4.5 to 5, there can be saturation, but then the approach is definitely going to change. Next interesting question people are asking, even definition of hallucination itself is questionable sometimes. How do you really differentiate what is exactly hallucination versus what is not? Because many times the context and the content where the informations are coming, that itself might be very subjective. It's a Rashomon kind of example where the reality may not be absolute. So how do we basically address a lot of concern from the user, and how do we address concern from business?
Do you want to, I would say the same thing, what we just said there about hallucinations. It's part of it. I think the good news is that everybody knows that hallucinations is part of this. So the expectations are set, which is don't necessarily trust the output. So trust, and you talked about that, Rak, is a huge topic, huge topic. And that's why people are trying to create frameworks and software and AI that checks AI and humans that check the AI. And we're still in a very early stage around that. And as I said, I don't think it's suitable for every situation. And so we have to, we have to be sensible. That's why we're all here, right?
Yeah, one thing I would add to that is my concern about ethical AI. There's no one set of values in the world. And so when I hear people talk about ethical AI, that's scary, because what will happen is that means that someone will impose their values on someone else. So ethical AI is not one thing, right? It's got to be many different, it's got to support many different value systems. There's many different value systems in different cultures and in different countries. So I think the way that applies to hallucination is, it's not, there's not always a fact and not a fact, but there's an interpretation of a fact as well. And those interpretations can be cultural, by company, by legal systems. So there's not one ethical AI. It has to support many different systems of ethics.
Thank you, Mike. I guess we are living with the human imperfect situation. Everything is not absolute, so we have to live with the machine imperfection also.
Yeah.
Another question we are coming about, again, this is about large language model training. So at what stage the panel feels the large language model, they are going to train themselves? They can create synthetic data, they can train themselves. Very hypothetical question, but it's not like
that's when it takes over humanity and kills us all, right?
I think we are still, models can train themselves, but whether they can train themselves on the right and all kinds of data and all kinds of modes of data, that's still far away, right? So humans are still required to point it in the right direction, what kind of data to ingest. But I think even going back to the previous question as well, I think the most important thing in all this is data preparedness, right? How good your enterprise data is if you want to leverage GenAI. And a lot of enterprises are actually waking up to that.
I think our time is up.
Okay, I guess. Thanks for.
Yes, thank you, Ravindra, for doing the questions. Edwina for being on the panel. Rak, Margarite, thank you.
Thank you. We are available for any questions outside as well. So thank you. Thank you. Thanks.